For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to StratNews Global. I am Nitin Gokhale. On our daily evening program, The Gist, we have a special guest today. I'll introduce him in a moment. My special guest today is Ambassador Wael, the Ambassador of Egypt to India, and someone who is now entrusted with the responsibility of conducting his country's President Sisi, who will be the chief guest at India's Republic Day on 26 January this year. Welcome to this special broadcast, Ambassador, and thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time, for taking the initiative and contacting me, and it's a great pleasure to be with you, Mr. Nitin. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me start with the most obvious question, what is the status of India-Egypt relationship as of today?
As of today, in order to speak about our status today, we will have to go back in time.
Please do.
Because usually, and this is something that came as a surprise to me personally, I found out that many people will know this, relations between Egypt and India were at the heyday in the 1950s and the 1960s at the time of Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru and President Nasser. But very few people know that relations go even older than that. And it's a great misjustice if we speak only about the time of the 50s and 60s, because even at the time of Mahatma Gandhi, there were close contacts with Saad Zarloul, the freedom fighter in Egypt. There were a lot of contacts at that time between them. And even if we go older in history, all the way back to the ancient Egyptians, we can actually find traces of India and Egypt trading together as old as 1500 BC. So relations between both countries have always been flourishing, have always been very close, and they have reached the heyday in the 1950s and 60s, as I said before. But I think we are witnessing now a new high for our relationship. It's for the first time that the President of Egypt is going to be the chief guest for Republic Day on the 26th of January this year. Personally, I was extremely surprised to know that it's the first time. I would have thought that maybe in the 50s or 60s it happened. But when I learned that it's the first time, I took it as a sign that we are actually starting a new phase of our relationship based on the understanding and the close admiration that is shared between President Sisi and Prime Minister Modi. And I think that the future will have a lot more to give for our relationship.
You spoke about the new era starting, let's say, of flourishing relationship. What are the areas of cooperation, mutual cooperation, and something that both countries are keen to work on, if you can identify some of them?
Well, we have many areas of cooperation, but let us start for example, by talking about trade. We have reached last year, 2022, a new high in our trade relationship. Our bilateral trade reached 7 billion. In spite of the unusual circumstances that we have gone through over the past 2 or 3 years. I'm speaking here about the pandemic, 2021. I'm speaking also about the Ukraine crisis, which started last year, and we're almost a year into the crisis now. But in spite of these two factors and all the associated disruptions in the supply chains globally, our trade has managed to increase actually to 7 billion. This does not mean, however, that we are satisfied with the 7 billion, because we have enormous opportunities in front of us. And just last July 2022, we had our trade commission meeting in Egypt, and it was agreed at the meeting that we should work together, India and Egypt, to reach at least a level of $12 billion over the coming 5 years. So this gives an indication of how much opportunities we have here.
Right.
In investments, we also have very strong relations. Now we have in Egypt approximately more than 50 Indian companies already operating in Egypt, and Indian investments in Egypt have reached a level of approximately $3.5 billion. But again, this is not sufficient.
Yes.
Because over the past 2 or 3 months, we have reached several investment agreements that are expected to take it to much higher potentials. Just one agreement that was signed 2 months ago on the sidelines of COP27 is for the production of green hydrogen, is with a volume of approximately $8 billion US.
Wow.
So when we're speaking now about 3.5, I hope that within the coming 2 or 3 years we can see the volume reaching up to the 20.
Yes.
To the 20s. So again, we have enormous potentials here. When it comes to specific sectors, I'm happy to say that as we are speaking now, we have our Minister of Information Technology visiting Bangalore. He was here in New Delhi for the first 3 or 4 days this week, and then he left just Wednesday, the day before yesterday. And as we're speaking now, he is visiting Bangalore to explore new areas of cooperation in the field of information technology, because India, of course, is one of the powerhouses in the world when it comes to information technology. So again, this sector is extremely important for us. In the area of pharmaceuticals and medical supplies, it's also very important for both countries, not only because, of course, I know India is, we speak of India sometimes as the pharmacy of the world, but not only because of that, but also because of the size of the Egyptian market and the outreach that Indian companies can find from Egypt into the areas of the European Union and North Africa, and also into the African continent. So basically, we're speaking here about Egypt being a place, a springboard from which you can reach up to 1,400 million people over and above the 1,400 people in India.
In India, equivalent to Indian population.
Exactly. And this is all because of the free trade agreements that we have concluded in Egypt with the European Union, with the African continent, as well as with the whole area of the Middle East. So the potentials are enormous. We just need to put our hands together and to actually put some effort into it, and we will reach a very substantial kind of partnership, hopefully the level of strategic partnership and cooperation.
Oh, that's great to know. And like you said, President Sisi is the first president to grace the occasion as the chief guest for Republic Day. There is also a political significance to it. I mean, India and Egypt are two big powers in their respective areas. And what is the other areas of cooperation that you're looking at in sense of India's presence in Middle East and Africa can be facilitated by Egypt, I'm sure. And similarly, Egypt can gain from India's standing. How do you look at it?
Absolutely. I think India has a very much interest in the African continent as a whole. And India has traditionally had very strong contacts with Africa, especially with the east of Africa. And now we have to think of Egypt, even though it's a little bit further than East Africa for India, but it's really a doorway to the rest of Africa. Because if we look at the west of Africa, the rest of North Africa, Egypt would be closest to India. And also Egypt has the Suez Canal, which connects to the north of Africa and to the European Union. So I think the strategic location of Egypt on the northeastern tip of Africa is very important for India. And also India as a subcontinent. India is not just any country. India is a huge country in the world. I think by the end of this year, India is going to be the most populous country in the world.
It will be.
So this is a very important factor that we take into consideration as India. And India is not just any developing countries. As I said, it's the biggest developing country, becoming the biggest developing country. And also it has the presidency of the G20 this year.
Right.
And Egypt has been invited as a guest to the G20 this year, including, of course, the summit level meeting that's going to be held here in New Delhi in September. And this is basically because Egypt and India, on many areas, on many issues that are important for developing countries, we see eye to eye on many of them.
Right.
We can speak here about food security, about energy security, about climate change, about development and job creation, about finance and the debt crisis. So as two big developing countries, Egypt and India can put their hands together and give voice to the global south in general.
Exactly.
And I think that in this respect, Egypt was chosen as one of the guest countries for G20, and we have all intentions not to be just a guest country, but to be an active and to give value added to the work of the G20 of the coming year.
Oh, that's very good to know. Egypt is also an important player in the Islamic world, if I can sort of expand the definition a little bit. And given its secular kind of tradition that Egypt has, Is there a similarity that you see between the societies of Egypt and India also?
The first thing that I really fell in love with here in India is how everybody's accepting everybody in spite of the diversity that is here in India. And it resembles to a great extent, very similar to what we have in Egypt. In Egypt, we have very diversified, of course, less diversified than India, but we still have people living side by side in peace, in harmony, accepting each other.
Sure.
Because what we have when we speak about Islam, for example, we have an enlightened version of Islam.
Very enlightened, yes.
Very enlightened. We accept each other. We are tolerant to each other. And to a large extent, we don't let politics and religion come together. They don't interfere in each other.
Right.
Because politics is something that takes into consideration interest and takes into consideration changes that happen over time, takes into consideration different perspectives, different point of views, as opposed to religion, which is something that many times is fixed, that we have to stick to. So we don't really believe that religion and politics should mingle. We refuse this idea, and we always separate both of them, even though Islam still remains part of the Egyptian culture in general.
Of course.
So it is part of the culture, but it will not become part of the politics here.
Which is good to know, and that's why I said there's huge similarities, like you've already pointed out.
Absolutely.
Now.
And we always also speak the role of Al-Azhar. You know, Al-Azhar is one of the oldest universities in the world. It's an Islamic university, but that doesn't only teach its students in religious issues, but also in sciences, in
astronomy,
in many other fields, just to prove that religion and science do not contradict. As a matter of fact, they come together.
Yeah, or they can
it's
coexist.
all for the benefit of humankind.
They can coexist.
Exactly.
For the benefit.
Exactly.
You are absolutely right. The other thing that I notice is also the curiosity in India about Egypt as a tourist destination. What are your plans for increasing the outflow of Indian tourists to Egypt, if any?
Of course there are. This is extremely important for us, especially when I tell you that the highest number of Indian tourists that we received in Egypt was in 2019, approximately 130,000. This is a very small number.
Very small considering our size.
Extremely small, taking into consideration that the outbound tourism in India is in the millions.
Right.
It's approximately 30 million or even more. Right. So if Egypt can only have 120 something thousand, this is a very limited number.
Right.
I think the major impediment that we have to this is that the air connectivity between both countries is still not as intense, as strong as it should be. So far, we only have a direct connection between Mumbai and Cairo, operated by Egypt Air. Unfortunately, we don't have any Indian companies operating direct flights between Egypt and India, and we don't have any connections between Delhi and Cairo. Two of the biggest capitals in the world.
Yes.
We don't have direct connections with them. And I think this is one of the issues that are going to be discussed during the visit of His Excellency the President, because we are counting a lot on Indian tourism coming to Egypt and on Egyptian tourism coming to India. I have to say that what makes Indian tourists different than any other tourists from any other country is that usually Indian tourists are very much interested not in Egypt as a resort destination on the Red Sea in Sharm el-Sheikh and Hurghada only, but also, and maybe even more important, Indian tourists are interested in the culture of Egypt. They're interested in Luxor, in Aswan, in Cairo, in Alexandria. So they usually want to see the historical side of Egypt. And I have also noticed over the past, I've only been here now for approximately a year and a half, but I have noticed that many Egyptian tourists are more and more interested in coming to India, because for a very long time, maybe because of the
lack of air connectivity, direct air connectivity.
Maybe because of the lack of this, India remains to be one of the hidden gems for Egyptian tourists. But the Egyptian tourists are slowly but steadily getting more and more aware of the opportunities here in India when it comes to tourism. I have personally seen so many places in India that are absolutely breathtaking. Let's not forget that this is a country that spreads all the way from the Himalayas in the north to
the Indian Ocean,
to the Indian Ocean in the south, and also a vast stretch from east to south, from east to west. So the potentials there are enormous. The diversity is enormous. No other city in India is like the other. And I have been enjoying it very much, and I hope that all Egyptian tourists who are coming here, who decide to come here, I'm sure that they're going to like it as much as I do.
Right, exactly. Now, on a more practical note, do you foresee any co-production, joint productions between Indian and Egyptian entities, either in this country or in Egypt? Either way, are there any ideas, proposals that have come to you on that front?
There are a lot of proposals that have been put on the table now. And as I said before, there are already 52 companies there, operating in Egypt. But the number, we still think that it does not represent the potentials of both countries. And as I was saying before, by locating in Egypt, Indian companies can tap into a market of more than 1 billion consumers of different economic categories. You have the wealthy consumers in the European Union, the less wealthy maybe in the Middle East and Africa. So all kinds of products from Egypt can penetrate into this market. And I always say that India sometimes is going into free trade agreements with several regions in the world. You already have the free trade agreements there. If you come and locate in Egypt, you already have them. You can enjoy them. Of course, within limitations of rules of origin for agricultural products, within the limitation of quotas maybe. But in general, the market is open. You have duty-free access to all of these areas. Over and above the investment incentives that we provide to the Indian investor, over and above the location that splits the distance between India and the European Union, or India and North Africa, basically into half. With all the associated cut down in cost of fuel, of insurance, of time, which has become increasingly important given the supply chain and the problems that we are facing these days. So again, what I want to say here is that Egypt is a very strategic location, and it's a great opportunity for Indian investments to come into Egypt, and they can enjoy there a lot of benefits. And let me add just one thing. I have to say this because before coming here, I had the pleasure of meeting with some of the 50 companies that that are operating in Egypt as well already. And I have to tell you the truth. When I was going into the meeting, I was a little bit worried that investors usually come up with complaints and with requests and with things that they don't like. And sometimes what they ask for is well beyond the ability of the ambassador to interfere with. But to my surprise, it was a very friendly occasion. And all I heard was words of praise about the investment climate, about how responsive the Egyptian government is when it comes to requests from the investors, and about how similar the business environment is in India and in Egypt.
There you are.
So everything is there in place, waiting for the Indian investors to come.
So the runway is ready. It's about to take off. And on that note, Ambassador, I must thank you for your time once again. And I wish you all the best and for the visit of the President. And I'm sure we are now going to witness a resurgence of India-Egypt ties in the coming months and years. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nitin. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Pleasure.